The final boss of Arc 3 Past Chaldea is one of the hardest story boss fight in FGO because of one mechanic, Thread of Fate. If your DPS has this status, your damage gets heavily reduced, your MP can get drained, and the whole fight becomes much harder than it needs to be. At the start of the battle, the boss applies Thread of Fate to your entire body, and she has a permanent passive that gives her special damage resistant against servants affected by Thread of Fate. Thread of Fate lasts for 3 turns and cannot be removed normally. However, you can shorten the amount by using a Noble Phantasm or landing critical attacks. Grand Servants are especially useful here because they can also reduce their own Thread of Fate duration at the end of your turn. But there is one important detail: even if your MP or crit reduce the Thread of Fate to 0, it does not disappear immediately during that same turn. This is why the core idea of this battle is not just using your strongest DPS, it is knowing when your DPS can actually deal damage. Outside of Thread of Fate, the boss also has several annoying effects. On odd number turns, she drains 50% MP from servants affected by Thread of Fate and reduces crit store based on the total amount of Thread of Fate status and heals herself. On even number turns, she can apply more Thread of Fate to a random servant. And on every 3 multiple turns, she removes up to 7 buffs from each servant at the end of your turn. Her Noble Phantasm also drains the party's MP by 20%, then deals AoE damage. She can increase her own charge with skills, and later in the fight, she gains invincibility pierce before using her MP. The fight is also longer than the first appear. The boss starts with 2 HP bars, but after you defeat the second bar, she restores her HP and gains 3 more bars, making this effectively a 5-bar boss fight. The regeneration works similar to Guts, so if you break the second bar with an MP, your follow-up card attacks can still damage the regenerated bar in the same turn. After the boss regenerates into final 3 bars, another major mechanic is added: Time Stop. Every 3 multiple turns from that point onwards, the boss activates Time Stop, and you get to choose one ally to freeze for that turn. That frozen ally cannot act, but after Time Stop ends, they receive 2 turns of cooldown reduction. So the best way to handle this is to choose a servant whose card you are not planning to use that turn, or a servant who scales you 1 back sooner. As long as you don't need that servant to attack that turn, Time Stop can actually become a benefit instead of a problem. Now for solution, since Thread of Fate reduces your damage, your goal is to avoid wasting your biggest burst when your main DPS is still heavily affected by it. Use Noble Phantasm, crits, and Grand Servant's effect to reduce the duration, then line up your big damage where the resistance is gone. This is why Grand Servants are extremely important for this battle. Their Grand Graph effects are active, giving them stronger offensive and defensive tools, and they reduce their own Thread of Fate duration at the end of your turn, which helps them reach their real damage window faster. You can bring up to 3 Grand Servants, 2 from your own roster and 1 from support. The quest also has a limited party cost, so you can build your strongest possible team without worrying about cost limit. So if your own roster is limited, the easiest solution is to borrow a strong Grand Attacker from support, then build the rest of your team around keeping that servant alive. Another important point is that every class matchup is neutral in this fight, so class advantage is not the main thing you are building around. Instead, your DPS choice should be based on 3 things: Grand Investment, trade damage, and gimmick counter. This is why Summer Castoria is such a strong option for this fight. She no longer suffers from defensive disadvantage. Her anti-perch defense can help protect the party against the boss' later invincibility pierce MP, and her defined special attack is useful because the boss has divinity. But Summer Castoria is not your only option. The boss has Beast, Lawful, Balance, Female, Humanoid, and Divinity traits, which makes a lot of trait-based DPS servants works well here. Some strong DPS examples are Kawakami Gensai, CL, Yuogameri, Monto Crystal, and Lilith. Kawakami Gensai is a popular Grand Assassin DPS, and she has defined special MP multiplier. CL and Yuogameri are also strong as they have Broken Kid, multiple gimmick counter, and command card manipulation. Monto Crystal and Lilith can also work as they have special damage against status they can apply themselves. However, debuff based damage can become less reliable later because the boss gains debuff immunity near the end of the fight. For more budget friendly DPS option, Okada Iso is worth worth mentioning because he has strong humanoid damage as a 3-star and he can work as a cheaper Grand Assassin option. Carmilla can also hit the female trade hard, although she is less commonly used as a Grand Servant. But if your own DPS options are not strong enough, the most budget-friendly route is to borrow a strong Grand DPS from support, then use your own servants to charge, protect, and buff the attacker. For support choices, you mainly want 3 things: buff removal resistance, anti-perch defense, and long fight sustainability. The boss can remove up to 7 buffs on 3 multiple turns, so servants like Summer Tiamat or Francesca Purilati can help protect your key buffs. Castoria is one of the excellent defensive support, as anti-perch defense still work against the boss's later invincibility pierce MP. March is another strong option for longer clears because her defensive buffs can reduce a lot of incoming damage across this 5-bar fight. And for a more accessible support route, servants like Hans, Sufu, and Asclepius can help depending on your team. Hans gives sustained and critical support, Sufu can support arts-based teams with healing, MP gain, and utility, and Asclepius give massive healing and guts. There are also a few specific danger points you need to pay attention to. The first major danger happens after the boss regenerates. After the first 2 bars are gone and the boss restores into her final 3 bars, she can apply a permanent, unremovable effect to your whole party, where every attack drinks 20% MP if the attacker is under threat of fate status. However, if you immediately break the regenerator bar in the same turn, the next bar effect overrides it, and this permanent MP drain effect can theoretically be skipped. So if your damage allows it, try to break the regenerator bar immediately after the boss revives. This can save you from one of the most annoying mechanics in the fight. The second danger point is the final phase. In the second last bar, the boss gains an effect where she applies invincibility pierce before using her MP, which makes invincibility and effect no longer reliable. If you're using Castoria or Summer Castoria, this is where anti-perch defense becomes extremely valuable. So to summarize the fight, the most important mechanic is Threat of Fate. If your DPS has it, your damage is reduced, so use Noble Phantasm, Threats, and Grand Servants to shorten it. Use Time Stop on the servant you do not need that turn, or on a servant whose skill you want back sooner. Take advantage of the unlimited party cost and up to 3 Grand Servants. Choose your DPS based on Grand Investment, trait damage, and gimmick counter, and be careful after the boss regenerates because the permanent MP drain and final phase invincibility pierce are the 2 biggest things that can ruin the run. That's the Part 3 Past Chaldea final boss guide for now. Let me know how you managed to clear this final boss fight, and if this guide helps, consider liking and subscribing for more FGO guides and server breakdown, as I'm currently pushing towards 1,500 subscribers before summer. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.